Peace. I'm still up and like I'm always doing, thinking about something. And I just recently posted something about sickness in the body and how on a physical level that's directly linked to our thoughts. And a lot of times you may hear people say stuff like that, like watch how you think, it can make you sick. You know, your thoughts do this, your thoughts do that. But rarely do people actually explain the chemistry of thought, how thought literally affects your physical form. A lot of people don't break that down. So I'm sitting up here thinking about it. So I was going to wait until tomorrow to do it, but I was like, nah, I'm going to just talk about it tonight. And then for those of y'all who are up, you get an opportunity to hear this. But so if you look at the post that I made before this video, I was explaining how thought directly impacts your physical body. You know, the same way that we talk about gases, liquids, and solids, from the thought, the emotional, and the physical aspect of the body, we go through that same exact process. Now, let me break this down. There's a difference between emotions and feelings. They are not the same thing. Emotions are tied directly to thought. It is impossible for you to experience a certain emotion like anger if you are not thinking about something first. It's impossible for you to physically even react or respond in anger without a thought. And just take a moment and try it if you don't believe what I'm saying. Get mad right now. Get angry right now without thinking a thought. You can't think about anything. Force yourself to get mad or angry. It's impossible to do it. So there's certain emotions that are only tied or linked to thought. Feeling is entirely different. Feeling is instinctual. Feeling is the physical body's natural response to stimuli in the environment. It's more of a sensory aspect of how you are interpreting the environment. So feelings don't require thought. Emotions do. So they're two entirely different things. Now think about this. How does a thought actually function? Well, first it's important to understand that thought is intangible intelligence. Thought represents the consciousness or the conscious grid that is intangible, that is directly connected to our physical body in a sensory way. So what do I mean by that? The same way you live in an environment and there's air around you right now, you can inhale it and exhale it. That oxygen or that air also contains consciousness or thought. When you study Buddhism, they talk about that as pranayama or pranayama. Basically, you are inhaling and exhaling thought or consciousness. Now, the environment, we are connected to that like a grid based upon our five senses. So what you see, what you smell, what you hear, what you taste, and what you touch. Your five senses are directly connected to your environment. You know, some people may not have certain senses, but generally speaking, your senses are directly connected to the environment. Based upon whatever stimuli is happening in that environment, it routes a signal through your physical body, primarily through your central nervous system, your brain being the command center of your central nervous system, that stimulus from the environment is routed through a network of neurons or nerves that signals in your brain through what you call a synapse. So a synapse is when neurons communicate with each other. So this sensory stimuli from the environment, once, for example, if somebody slapped you on your leg or something like that, that stimulus from the environment is going to be interpreted through your body. If you see something, that light that enters through your optics, your nerve endings, is going to be routed through those neural pathways and go to your command center or your brain. If you taste something, that is something sensory from the environment. If you smell something, if you hear something, anything that your senses actually picks up or receives from the environment is transmitted through your central nervous system to its command center, which is your brain. What happens in the brain next is nerves begin to communicate with each other. Either those nerves are going to create a new synapse because this is a new stimulus from the environment that it really has no reference point to associate with that, or that stimulus from the environment is going to be routed across nerve endings or neurons that already have a sense of being familiar or a memory associated with that experience. So in other words, say I'm viewing something for the first time. That stimulus that enters through my nerve optics or my eyes is routed through my central nervous system to my command center in my brain. If that's something that I'm seeing for the first time, it's going to create a synapse, which means nerves have to connect or communicate with each other. So nerves aren't touching like this. There's a small juncture between nerves that creates what you call a synapse, or an electrical current that travels from one neuron to the next. So every time you're thinking a thought or you're receiving stimuli from the environment, your brain is lighting up like lights. You know, you have spikes in the neurons in your brain because you're having activity based upon what's being received and then transmitted into your body through your nervous system. So when that synapse occurs, there's what you call neurotransmitters, which is a chemical compound that allows that electrical impulse to travel across that juncture. So it'll be no different than being on some land right here, and then you want to get across to this other little part of land, and there's water in between you. That water would be equivalent to like a neurotransmitter, a chemical compound that allows you to travel from one to the next. That's the exact same thing that happens with a synapse in the brain. The neurotransmitter, which is a chemical compound made up of amino acids, which is primarily like carbon, oxygen, you know, some of those things that you learn about on the periodic table, that creates what you call a synapse. So this happens every time that you think. So thought itself doesn't originate in the brain. Thought, as intangible intelligence, is a part of the conscious grid that we are sensory connected to. The same way there's oxygen around you right now. You cannot see it with your physical eye, but it allows you to actually live. It helps stimulate life. Consciousness is the exact same way as intangible intelligence. So when you think about it in that way, thought or consciousness is more likened to a gas. That gas goes and is absorbed through your sensory aspects of the physical body, and through neurotransmitters and other chemicals, it actually becomes a liquid. So that thought or that consciousness becomes liquefied through the physical body. And then, say for example, you're standing here and there's a car that's approaching you and you need to jump out of the way, right? Now, when that stimulus is received by your physical body or your nervous system and creates a synapse in the brain about what this is, it sends another signal right back down through the central nervous system to those particular parts of the body that needs to be used. So you have nerves or neurons that's connected to your muscles. And that is what makes you have the ability to get out of the way when something like that is coming. That's why people are encouraged not to drink when they're using like heavy equipment or they're driving cars or whatever, because it retards or it delays the communication neurologically when it comes to the physical body. So you may think a thought real quick, but by the time it reaches the actual muscles that need to move, it's a little delayed. It's a little step off. You know, the same way when I mentioned about the neurotransmitters that are used, that travels across the junctures from one neuron to the next when you're basically having a thought. Those neurotransmitters consist of amino acids. Amino acids are an important part of establishing proteins, right? So all of these various different chemicals that are a part of maintaining a proper balance in our physical bodies comes from the foods that we eat. So if we're eating the wrong foods, it's going to throw our body off in terms of chemical imbalance. I mean, think about some of the medications that people take that deliberately inhibits the production or increases the production of certain chemicals within the body. You know, some people may have a lack of certain chemicals in the body. They may take a certain type of medication or whatever, and it's designed to increase that. You know, some people their body may be producing too much chemicals for some reason, and then they may take a chemical inhibitor, something that limits or restricts that chemical being produced inside the body. You know, so one of the things that I mentioned in that post is when a person is experiencing certain emotions like anger or fear, what happens is that stimulates the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands release adrenaline. Adrenaline is released into the bloodstream, and what ends up happening is it increases the heart rate. It raises the blood sugar levels. It also temporarily paralyzes the digestive system. So under normal conditions, energy and resources are distributed to various different parts of the physical body. But under the condition of fight or flight, or when adrenaline is released into the bloodstream, that's like calling all of the energy or directing all of the energy to a specific part that can be used to get a person out of that particular scenario that is either, you know, fearful or something they need to take flight from. So that is one of the reasons why there's been recorded incidences of people performing almost superhuman acts under conditions of fear or anger, because that adrenaline is being released into the bloodstream. You know, even to the point where a person may not even feel pain from things that they're actually going through. You know, it is only when that adrenaline is no longer in their system that they begin to feel what actually happened. But like I said, when that's being released into the bloodstream, it paralyzes or restricts the digestive system temporarily. So think about this. Imagine a person that's living under constant fear or anger. They're living in an environment where they have that constant sense of stress, where the level or degree of adrenaline or epinephrine that's being released into the bloodstream is something that's more on a consistent basis. So in other words, this person is damn near always in a fight or flight mode, right? That messes with their digestive system, because your digestive system is going to be temporarily paralyzed at certain times, right? So Think about this type of person that eats a standard American diet. They're eating 3 full meals a day. They're eating a lot of meat, which takes a lot more time to digest. They may be eating a lot of processed foods that's very high in sodium or sugar. Um, and then they're living under the constant stress of wanting to fight or take flight, which means that their digestive process is not going to be consistent. That is going to put not only a lot of wear and tear on their digestive system, because they're not going to be having a consistent release of gastric fluids in order to digest food. It's going to also create sickness in a sense where you're going to be having certain foods sitting in your body longer than other times when it should be easily digested, which creates a sick or unhealthy environment within. So you can directly see how thought in the form of emotions, because emotions are connected to thought, directly affects your health. It directly affects your circulatory system. It directly affects your digestive system. And that is one of the reasons why people say, or people are taught, how you think is going to affect your health. It literally does. It literally does. Because those thoughts connected to those particular emotions is going to alter the body's chemistry. And when the body's chemistry is altered, it's also going to affect the way in which that physical body can function, your capacity to do certain things, just even on a simple level of digesting your food. A poor digestive process can potentially create strokes, heart disease, a lot of different things, aside from just fatigue. And imagine if a person's eating a lot of the wrong foods. A lot of the wrong foods. I mean, look at meat, for example, that is just left outside. How long it takes for the meat to begin rotting or going to a putrefied state. Just outside. You think that don't happen on the inside of the body? If meat is just sitting inside you for a long time? It creates an atmosphere of sickness. So just in terms of the chemistry of thought or intangible intelligence or consciousness is around us at all times. And it's not to say that these are elementals or physical, beings and all this other stuff that people say or talk about. I ain't talking about that. I'm talking about your physical body is constantly and directly connected to a grid on a sensory level. All of your 5 senses are directly connected to everything that's around you, whether you are conscious of it or not. There are certain scents around you that you don't smell. They're still there. Your body is still receiving those scents that are around you. There are things physically around you or things that you are not conscious of that your eyes are picking up or receiving. Doesn't mean that you're conscious of these things, but these things are around you. Same thing with your sense of hearing. There are things around you that are being received on a sensory level through your ears that you are not conscious of right now. Same thing with taste. Same thing with touch. So what does that mean? Well, on a basic level, there are certain things around you on a sensory level, dealing with all 5 of your senses, that are being processed or received through your physical body, routed through your central nervous system to your command center, that is being received that you are oftentimes not even conscious of. Also, there are people who are skilled enough to create things on a sensory level, whether that is with the sense of sight through symbolism or through colors, whether that is through the sense of hearing with specific type of sounds or tones, whether that is through the sense of touch, whether that is through the sense of smell, any of your senses. You have people who are skilled enough to create things that on a sensory level you are going to receive whether you are conscious of it or not. So for example, one of the things that you may notice at certain restaurants, fast food chains, they like using the color orange because they understand that the color orange stimulates appetite. So they strive to deliberately use those type of colors because whether you are conscious of it or not, on a sensory level, you are going to receive that stimuli from the environment. It doesn't matter if you can consciously interpret it or not. That's even better for the people who are marketing those type of things. So people are being manipulated on a sensory level and are not even aware or conscious of it by people who are very skilled and knowledgeable about the exact same thing that I'm talking to you about. Even when it comes down to the sense of smell, there are people who are able on a chemical level to create scents that are going to stimulate you in a certain type of way, and you don't even know it. So how do you learn about these things? First, you learn about what I explained to begin with. We are connected to a grid on a sensory level. Everything around us is being received through our senses. And I explained that process about how stimuli from the environment is being routed through a nerve pathway or nervous system that's central with a command center as the brain. As that stimuli is being received, that command center or brain determines on a synaptic level whether this is something that is new, so it basically references it to memory, or it creates a new neural pathway to integrate with the other neural pathways or neural clusters that light up every time you make a decision. So this is another thing that happens, right? You know how, say I'm in the front of a class, right? And I have a group of students in the class, like 50 students in the class. And I start asking questions and I say, yo, everybody who thinks that this is the truth or whatever, raise your hand. So I may have a certain amount of group of youth in that class that raises their hand. I may say, well, how many people think that this is true? I may have more of a group of children that are in that class raise their hand. When you think a thought or you're going through the thought process or striving to determine what something is, that's the exact same thing that happens in the brain. Your brain spikes in terms of neural clusters, just like groups of youth in a classroom. And whatever lights up most or lights up more, whatever neural clusters are able to inhibit the other neural clusters, just like if you're making giving people a choice and you say, yo, how many people want to do this? How many people do that? And then it may be 38 people that say yes over here, and it may only be 12 that say yes over there, and you go with 38 people. The exact same process literally happens in the brain when you're in a position where you're striving to determine whether you should do this or that. You have certain neural clusters that light up more than the ones that are the decision that you don't make. Does that make sense to y'all? So thought, like I mentioned, is directly connected to emotion. You cannot get emotional about something or get angry without thinking a thought first. It is impossible. And like I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, get mad right now without thinking about something. It's impossible. It's impossible. Emotions and feelings are different. Feelings are more of what you call priority knowledge or instinctual. It's more on an empathic level, meaning feelings are directly sensory connected to the environment. It doesn't require thought. Just like you can walk into an environment and you feel a certain way, then you start thinking about what you felt. That is feeling. You know, a lot of times people mix them up and they be in their emotions and then talk about, yo, I'm just feeling some kind of way. No, you're not feeling some kind of way. You're being emotional right now because everything that you're talking about is linked to some type of thought, whether that thought is legitimate or not. That is the root of how you're expressing yourself right now. But when it comes to feeling is a direct link or connection to the stimuli that is going on in the environment. And it is processed through the central nervous system up to the brain as the command center. The brain as the command center actually interprets what that stimuli is. Now think about this. Think about if a person has limited life experiences. They don't read. They are not investigating anything. They're not curious. Think about how much that they will misinterpret based upon the stimuli in the environment, because number one, they don't have much to reference. They don't have much experience or even memory that stimuli in the environment can actually be connected to on a synaptic level. There's nothing, that process is not going on in the brain, you know? So one of the things that I did with my daughters growing up is I consistently exposed them to stimuli from the environment, information, you know. Their mother did the exact same thing, you know, taking them places, exposing them to stuff, because that was being brain architects. Because here's the thing, growing up and children that you see, their brain is going through a process called synaptic pruning. By the time a child is 6 years old, their brain is over 90% fully formed at that point. And then the brain starts going through a process called synaptic pruning, because what it's doing now is striving to make that brain function more efficiently or effectively. So a lot of those different synaptic connections or whatever are pruned away, especially if they're not used on a consistent basis. And there's truth to that phrase, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. That's literally what happens in the brain, especially in the first 6 years of a child's life, you know? So those first experiences become the most impressionable because they are literally becoming a part of the brain. They are literally becoming a part of the reference guide or the reference material that outside stimuli is going to be connected to. You know, it's important to continuously learn, you know, all of our life. But what I'm talking about is just the first 6 years. You know, so usually when people are learning about who they are, and I mentioned this in the broadcast a few days ago, it's easy for a person to understand if I say, yo, this is my shirt, it belongs to me, right? It's mine. Okay, so if this is mine, I'm right here. You know, even if I were to say this is my hand, this is mine, which means it belongs to me. But it's difficult sometimes for people to understand if I said this is my body, it's mine, it belongs to me. So what am I ultimately? Because I can't be the body. I just said the body is mine. So I can't be both. You know, just like if I said this is my shirt. Well, if this is my shirt and it belongs to me, I'm obviously somewhere separate from this. My shirt. Same thing with my hand. This is my hand. I can stick it out over here. And then you see me here. But if I said this is my body, then what am I? What am I? I'm obviously not my body because that's mine. What am I? Even if I said this is my voice that's coming out of me, it's mine. What am I? What is my real voice? You know, a lot of times people don't think about things like this, but what these questions imply is that greater are you than this shirt, than this hand, than this body. Greater are you than that. So essentially what I'm telling you is we are consciousness dwelling within the form. The same way that I said that this body is connected to consciousness or the environment on a sensory level, you are the consciousness that is in the body that is connected to everything on a sensory level. So it's no different than a cup of water sitting inside of a lake or a body of water. Look at a body of water, which is a stream of endless consciousness, and take a glass of that and sit it inside. That's exactly what we are. We are the consciousness inside of that cup or in this body, as well as the consciousness that permeates everything around us. The only buffer or connecting aspect to that consciousness is the physical body. And we're in tune with that consciousness through the physical body's sensory connection to that consciousness. Does that make sense to y'all? You know, it's a very, even in various different religions, we're taught this, but people don't see it. Like I just said, greater is thee that is in you than in the world. You learn right that in the Bible. The kingdom of heaven is within. You know, image in the likeness of God. It's telling you that you are greater than what you actually appear to be. You are consciousness within this form. So, thinking about it on that level, right? Consider how limited people are to walk around with this belief that they are only human. We all fall short. We all have sin. Okay, yeah, that may apply if you're talking about a physical body, because this physically has some limitations to it. It's the densest form of that consciousness. It's very slow. But think about thought, how fast thought actually travels when stimulus from the environment is received on a sensory level, and it goes through the central nervous system all the way up to the command center called the brain and shoots back down for you to respond or to move or to say something. You know how fast that travels? It travels faster than your ability to even think about it or process it. That's faster than light, which travels 186,000 miles per second. It's faster than sound, which only travels 1,120 feet per second. It's fast. You know? But I think a lot of times people have a very low idea of who they are. You know, and that's where a lot of our vacant and low self-esteem comes from, because a lot of people define themselves based upon limitations. Imagine if I'm walking around here defining myself based upon the kind of car I drive, or the person I'm connected to or married to, or the type of clothes that I got, or money that what? That defines me? That defines some people? And you can see how people who think like this about themselves are so easily manipulated. Easily manipulated. Because these things that they tie themselves to and are connected to are limited. They are nothing in comparison to the value of the consciousness that makes you who and what you actually are. You know what I'm saying? So think about that. You know, when a person doesn't have a firm foundation and sense of identity of who they are, easily manipulated. Because like I just mentioned, because on a physical level, we are on a sensory level connected to all of the different stimulus that's in the environment, whether we're picking up something visually, through our ears, through what we taste, through what we smell, through what we touch. We're not always conscious of the different type of messages or signals that we're receiving from the environment. And you have some people who are very crafty. Are you aware that a person can create certain geometric symbols? And I'm about to get a little more deep with y'all. Are you aware that people can create certain geometric symbols that will stimulate you on a visual level that you are just simply not aware of, and manipulate you on a neuromuscular level to respond in a certain type of way? Do you know that people can create certain tones or pitches that you are going to respond to? It's not a question of whether or not you will or won't. You're not even conscious of it any damn way. And make you do something. Most of us is walking around completely oblivious to what I'm talking about right now. So when we talking about knowledge of self, knowing what you essentially are, it's also letting you know that you should be aware of what's going on in your environment. I mean, even think about secret societies and how they operate, hidden right in plain sight. And the average person may have people like that in their own damn family, and they don't even know what they're doing. You know? Yeah. But yeah, it's important to understand these things because people are being socioeconomically engineered, you know, and are just completely helpless when it comes to this because, number one, they don't have a firm foundation. Like I said, if a person doesn't understand the essence of who they are, what the true self is, which is consciousness dwelling within the form, not the form itself. If a person doesn't have a firm foundation in what that means, they can easily be manipulated and swayed to believe in any and everything. You know, even what I mentioned about the difference between emotions and feelings. Some people is easily manipulated on an emotional level, linked to thoughts that they just don't even know. And then they put it in the category, oh, that's just how I feel. I just feel this and I'm empathic. I'm intuitive. No, you're not. No. Someone's manipulating what you're doing right now because you don't know what you're talking about. You know what I'm saying? But all of these things are important. Most people are not having discussions like this. They just walking around talking about, I'm just human. Or I came from a monkey or somewhere through evolution or some bullshit like that. I mean, even when we look at it on a simple level of when we were physically born. That's why just in the 5%, we reference that as that's our physical born day or our degree day or things along those lines, which actually implies that, yo, I have no beginning or an ending. I'm older than the sun, moon, and stars, essentially, because I'm consciousness dwelling within the form. So whatever your physical birth date is, that is when you were incarnated. That is when your consciousness was incarnated in that physical form on that particular birth date. Greater are you than that is within this form. You can simply see it in a child. When a child is incarnated, when their consciousness becomes one with that physical form and they're born and they're looking around and they're learning how to engage the environment on a sensory level, that looks no different than a person who's sitting inside a brand new vehicle trying to figure out where all the bells and whistles are, how they can do this and how they can do that. It is no different. When you're looking at a baby walking around and they're just curious, and that is the first time that consciousness is within that form. And you can see them learning how to drive this physical vehicle the same way somebody buys a brand new car. It's no different. But the same way that that person got inside of that car to drive it, a baby is consciousness inside of that form. It's no different. Thankfully, we have parents as facilitators, you know, on a genetic level to give us the ability to have form. So I'm talking in a way that a lot of times people don't communicate, because a lot of people think that all they are is a form. All they are is their body. All they are emotions attached to thoughts, and that is who they are. It's easy to sway and manipulate people like that, you know? So this is also important to understand. When people have a religion, right? The goal of that religion, I don't care what it is for a person to have a personal relationship or a connection to what they consider that higher power or that most high to be. Which means that person's ultimate goal should be the embodiment, not just of those teachings, but of that teacher. And if that teacher is the most high or the creator or whoever, they should be the embodiment of that in the physical form. Be like Christ, be like Muhammad, be like Buddha, be like whoever you follow, so that you can become the manifestation of what that creator, what that consciousness, what that most high is in the physical form. That is the goal. Not to be following somebody and them being a permanent facilitator or mediator between you and your own sense of self. That is not the goal. That is not the goal. Facilitators are important temporarily, but you should only follow to the extent of learning to lead yourself. No one has no closer relationship to the creator or the most high than you do. Nobody does. Everybody has their own experience. Everybody has their own journey, but nobody's no more connected than nobody else. And if somebody's telling you that, they're a liar. They are a liar. You know? But, you know, these things are important to understand, because people are being manipulated. They're being used. They are being abused because they're not learning about what they essentially are. What is your true self? What is your true self? I mean, the essence of this is cosmology. Cosmology is the study of the origin of the universe. A lot of times people are not even studying that. And even if they are studying the origin of the universe, they are under the belief that they somehow evolved thousands and thousands of years down the line off a monkey somewhere. How? How? If you are consciousness within the form, then you are essentially the source through which all things originate. It was a process, but you're not disconnected from the so-called creator or most high or anything like that. You're not some little small person in the microcosm. You know what I'm saying? You're a microcosm in a macrocosm. No. But some people are taught that and they believe it. So you can easily see why some people have vacant and low self-esteem, or they find it difficult and hard to be able to accomplish certain goals or tasks or meet certain challenges in life. That is because they don't identify with the infinite potential that is within them. That is the creator. If a person really knew that, how could something stop you? How? The only way something can stop you is if you are associating yourself with something that is not of what's divine. That is the only way. If a person's feeling doubtful or I don't know if I could do this, you must be identifying with different aspects of that ain't you. That's definitely not you. You talking about stuff that's not of you. And if you are, that is a reason why you don't think you're capable. Or that you can do this or you can't do that, you know? And the ironic thing about it is people who set up and build institutions or dominate how resources are being shared or who manipulate the economy, people who are in positions like that, they know exactly what I'm talking about. That's why people can't stop them. It ain't just because they got some military force to protect them. Nah, they understand and have tapped into understandings about who they are that is not being shared with the masses of people. And like I said, one thing that they do is they deliberately use disinformation, misinformation, and manipulate people on a sensory level because they know that they're going to react and respond to whatever that they're putting out here to stimulate that reaction and response. There are certain colors on the vibration scale that are going to make you respond or react a certain way. It doesn't matter what you think. It's going to make you respond and react on a sensory level. Period. Whether you know it or not. You know what I'm saying? Why do you think television is called programs? People are being programmed. You know, if a person is not being taught how to critically analyze or to think about things, you just being moved. You being manipulated. And like I said, I'm not talking about feelings. I'm talking about being emotionally manipulated. Because you cannot get emotional unless you think a thought. Emotions are linked to thought. And if you have a bunch of the wrong thoughts, that is going to affect you on an emotional level, which is going to throw your whole body chemistry off. You know, like I mentioned earlier, certain emotions, such as anger, fear. When a person's afraid, right, it paralyzes them. It paralyzes them. That's not just paralyzing your body, that's also paralyzing your digestive system. You're not even digesting food at that point when you have that rush of adrenaline going through your body, when you're in fight or flight mode. All of your energy is being directed towards getting you out of that situation or you fighting your way out of that situation. So it's not just paralyzing you I've got sleep paralysis or something like that. Nah, your digestive system is paralyzed too. That messes everything else up. Imagine you already eating something that ain't good for you. And as it sits, it creates a sick or germ-infested environment on your inside. That's creating a lot of work for your immune system, you know? And people don't realize that. And that's all linked to how you think. If you're thinking a certain way, it's going to affect you on a physical level. You know? Because like I said, you know, when you are thinking a thought, you have a synapse in the brain. That's a neurological process. You know, cells communicate. Neurons communicate with each other when you're thinking a certain thought. And in order for neurons to communicate or for nerves to have a synapse, there's an electrical impulse that travels from one nerve to the next. They're not touching like this. You know, you got nerves and you got these things on the end of the nerves called dendrites, and they're not touching. You know how they touch? A neurotransmitter, which is a chemical compound, travels from one to the next, carrying that signal. That is what happens. Neurotransmitters are composed of amino acids. You know what I mean? If you're not eating right, that affects what's happening on a biochemical level. It's literally affecting you on a biochemical level. You know, so how you process or think about the stimulus that's in your environment is physically affecting you. You know, that's why it's important, you know, when people talk about positive affirmations or, you know, to some people that are Christians, they read certain scriptures in the Bible, and some say, they're putting on the armor of God. Some Muslims, they pray before sunrise. These are all practices of getting your mind right. You know what I'm saying? Orientating you on a psychological level before you start socializing. In early childhood development, working with like children that's 6 and under, a larger part of teaching them is social emotional. It ain't just this is A, B, C, D, E. I mean, that's part of it. You're teaching them about how to identify symbols, and colors and different, notes. And you're teaching them how to start recognizing stimulus in the environment. But a large part of that education is social emotional. A large part of that. And the social emotional is primarily psychological. Getting their mind right. The psyche. So people who are religious, if they are practicing what it is that they study, they get their mind right in the morning before they leave out of that house, which is important because it psychologically orientates them to be able to properly engage whatever's going to occur throughout that day from a positive perspective, a sense of empowerment, and as people of color, we live in a society that is white supremacist, meaning the notion that white is superior, white is right, white is great, and you have institutions, you have the direction of resources, you have an economy that reinforces that ideology. And I'm not just talking about people running around with hoods on or Make America Great Again hats on. I'm talking about people who have orchestrated a sophisticated network or a system to make sure that their power, their dominance maintains what that status quo is. And you have some people who may not be an active participant in doing it, but they still benefit from the privilege of having the complexion for that connection. You have a lot of people who experience white privilege because of that system. And they may, like I said, they may not be active participants or hood wearing KKK, but they're still benefiting from this notion of white supremacy, this lie. What that means for us as people of color is that you don't even got to go out of your own house to engage attacks on your identity or attacks on what I've explained earlier about being consciousness or divine within the physical form. You're constantly under attack, especially if you're not conscious of what is going on. I mean, some of us live in a house right now where they look around and there are images that reinforce white supremacy. Some of us got pictures of a European Jesus or something like that and prophets and all that in our house, or other different iconography or images that reinforces what the status quo is. And we don't think nothing wrong with it. We got children with little white baby dolls and stuff like that. Or we go and just as soon as we get up in the morning, we turn on television so that they can tell us how to view the world. All of that right around us. Turning on the radio, listening to the artistic interpretation of the world from their perspective. Eating foods that is reflective of their diet. That's all before we even walk out the house. And then we wonder why we may be sick all the time or constantly going through these ups and downs emotionally. Some of us, we're not manic depressive, right? We're just dealing with the ebbs and flows of society, being a person of color and living in a white supremacist system. Having to deal with and cope with the fact that you have a certain group of people who dominate and control the resources, the institutions, and the economy. Now think about this. You look at people who identify as white, right? All over the planet Earth. The planet Earth is 196,940,000 square miles, 139,685,000 square miles of land, and of water, 57,255,000 square miles of land, right? You have people who identify or classify themselves as white all over the planet, right? Whenever they're in proximity to people of color, whenever they're in proximity to us, why do they always have control over the institutions, the economy, and the resources? How is that possible? That defies logic. It defies probability. How do you explain that? How do you explain that everywhere you go on the planet Earth, where you see people who classify themselves as white, in proximity to people of color, that is the white group, who are usually the minority, who have control of the institutions, the resources, and the economy, wherever there is that type of proximity? Now, there's a few ways to explain it. Either these people who define themselves as white are naturally superior. That's why they're naturally better, or, that is one way to explain it. Another way to explain it is people of color are naturally inferior and don't know how to manage the institutions, the resources, or the economy when they're in proximity to each other. Or another way to explain it is there must have been some systematic way that this minority group of people were successfully able to control the institutions, the resources, and the economy. Not because this group of people of color willingly gave them that ability or responsibility. How do you explain that? Some people don't want to explain it, because it's going to leave them to give you one of those three scenarios. If they say white people are naturally superior, okay, some people think that. But there are a lot of instances that proves that wrong. So that's not what it is. You have some people that say, well, people of color are inferior. That's not what it is, because there are too many examples to prove that wrong. So it leaves us with the last scenario. It was a systematic way that this group of people operated, who classify themselves as white, whenever they have been in proximity to people of color, that has allowed them to get control of the resources, the institutions, and that economy. So when you begin to explore that third option, there's something consistent that you begin to see about people who classify themselves as white whenever they are in proximity to people of color all throughout the planet Earth. And if you're a student of history, if you study and do research, you will start finding that consistency whenever you see that proximity. You'll start seeing a lot of things on a social emotional level, on a psychological level, when you've had those groups in proximity to each other. And this is a thread that even runs through religion. Like some people, when they get into the church, or they get into the mosque, or they get into the synagogue or whatever, they try to act like these are neutral spaces or something. Where this day on Sunday is a neutral day in comparison to whatever I've been going through the other 6 days of the week. So we're not going to talk about that, because that's separate from what we're doing here. Like this compartmentalization when it comes to real life. When was the last time you've heard some pastor at a church giving an analysis on the transatlantic slave trade and how that impacted us in terms of our worldview when it comes to our relationship to what we see as the creator? When was the last time you heard a pastor talk about that and breaking that down? They don't. They act like that ain't got nothing to do with nothing. We ain't gonna talk about that. How? Same thing with Muslims. You have Muslims that don't talk about that, when that was a very critical part of a lot of our journey over here into the wilderness of North America, you know? But, I know I went off into that particular area, but, they try to diagnose the fetus to infant with MH disorders, ADHD. They prescribe Adderall to hyper children diagnosed with ADHD. True indeed. But the key to us understanding who we essentially are is cosmology. How did this universe come to be? And where is our place in that universe? If we are under this impression that we're some kind of mammal, somewhere down the line that evolved from monkeys, then it shows why we have a lot of these issues and the incapacity to do certain things. Because that is what we define our essential nature and identity as. Even if we walking around defining ourselves based upon, like I said, the car we drive in or the clothes we got or all of these superficial topical things that are not what we essentially are. You were who you were before you got here. Before somebody gave you a name, you were who you were. Even when you look at DNA, right? DNA is a code. It's a genetic code. A code is a writing. It's a writing. So our destiny or our purpose was scripted before we were even physically seen. So you have a genotype and you have a phenotype. Your genotype is what you genetically are. Your phenotype is what you look like. So when you're looking at genes or genetics as a code, it was coded, it was written in terms of what our potential destiny was before we even arrived here. Now, because we are a sentient being and we are consciousness dwelling within the form, we have a choice to do with this form what we so choose. Can you give a class on each individual sense by breaking it down? Yeah, I could do that. Well, peep this. When you think about solid, liquids, and gases, I broke that down about how mind or consciousness is gas. Liquids are the chemical compounds, or we're 3/4 water. That's the liquid. And then we have the physical form, bone, muscle, other different aspects of what we are. So we are liquids, we are gases, we are solids. We are also the elements, fire, air, water, and earth. Just like I said, you look at our sympathetic nervous system, you look at our organs that distributes and filters and carries water. We're 3/4 water, so we are water. We are earth because earth is composed of minerals and vitamins. Every food that you eat, you are made of all of the elements. You are the periodic table. And those elements are from the elements. So you are the earth. Can you read those written codes through astrology? I wouldn't say sidereal astrology, none of that Sylvia Brown astrology. But if you go back to more the Kemetic form of breaking down the elements like what I'm saying, yeah, that has a link. That has a link to us on a genetic level. So like I said, we are water. We are earth. We are fire, just like I explained about having the synaptic connections in the brain. You know what I'm saying? The acids that help, or the gastric acids that help break down food, that's fire. That's why people in India usually, or you have certain cultures that use cayenne pepper or other hot spices in their food, because that's literally fire. It's fire. It helps break down or stimulates the digestive process. And if you eat too much hot foods, what does it create in your stomach? An ulcer. It will burn a hole in your stomach. So not only on that level is that fire. Ginger, true indeed, fire. nutmeg, fire. All of those are forms of fire. And even on a neurological level, your nervous system is constantly sparked when it comes to having synaptic connections. That is an electrical current that travels from one dendrite to the other. That travels across using a neurotransmitter. That is an electrical impulse. That's fire. Air, oxygen. So when you study people talking about alchemy and, that being the fifth element and everything, and alchemy is the consciousness that unites or forges all of these elements into one. Alchemy in like the study of like some of the past societies, you needed a black elixir in order to convert baser metals into gold. And I'm just talking about alchemy right now. That black elixir is carbon. Carbon is a base for melanin. All things originate in darkness or in blackness. And you need that to transmutate anything into gold. Even when you just look at gold AU on the chemical chart, that all derived from blackness. You know what I mean? So when a person physically dies, you simply return back to the elements that the physical form is composed of. The water, the air, your breath returns back to the oxygen. You're changing your diet, your thought process can redirect those neural pathways. Absolutely. And fasting helps redirect those neural pathways, because when you're talking about neural pathways, you're talking about synapses, or impressions in the brain, which become routines. That's what memory is. They become impressionable reference points of your life experience. So, generally speaking, for a child, it takes a child to be exposed to something at least 12 times for them to begin to positively respond to it, even if it's negative. People understand these processes. You have people who are in positions that are deliberately engineering the type of social environments and economics that they would like to see, because they understand the science that I'm talking about. So like I said, it takes a child to be exposed to something at least a minimum of 12 times before they positively respond to it, even if it's straight negative. Think about the top 40 radio stations that continuously play certain songs. There's certain songs that right now in your mind that you can hum the lyrics to that you don't like, that you don't listen to. How you know that? How many children have you known that you may have young children in your house? You don't play the radio in the house. They go outside and be around their friends and all this other stuff. They not really listening to the radio like that. And they don't be online all the time. How do they know them songs word for word like that? Mind manipulation. Mind manipulation. You know what I'm saying? So we have to put ourselves in a position where we can strategically reorganize ourselves. A great part of that, even in the Bible, all of the stuff that I'm talking about on a scientific level was right there in the Bible, but people a lot of times weren't being taught what that means. You know what I'm saying? Fasting is an important part of being able to teach you how to reorganize your cells and to redirect neural pathways Because a lot of times fasting was also associated with meditation or prayer. Why? Why was fasting and abstaining from ingesting something from the environment? Why was that practice associated with a mental practice, whether that was meditation or prayer? Why? You know, it's like a lot of those things were just right there that we've always learned. You know, being taught how to eat certain plants or not eating pork. Right there. And when you start studying the science of it, you're like, oh, snap. A pig could get bit by a rattlesnake and the poison don't even affect them because they don't even got a circulatory system like we do. So naturally they're fat. Naturally them as a creature, they are walking sickness. They can eat rattlesnakes. So the type of poison, I mean, that's why we have pores. That's why we have pores. Pigs ain't got no pores. That's why they be rolling around in the mud to keep themselves cool. So if they're not releasing poison, or if they're not releasing certain things through their, because they ain't got no pores, where is it going? It remains encased in their flesh. You know, it's certain things like that are just, when you study the science of it, you like, yo. You know what I mean? But people don't. We're not being taught to critically think. To give you a breakdown to discern from right or wrong. Yeah. But a lot of things, you know, just in the society itself appeals to us on an emotional level, you know, bypasses our critical thinking and goes directly to us on a sensory level. Like I mentioned, I mean, even when you go in a supermarket, right? Why do you think when you get to the checkout line, they have those quick things and usually candy at the eye level of a child? Just on a marketing level, it creates what you call an urgency to buy. And it's right eye level for them. That's done on purpose. All of that stuff is done on purpose. But when we don't study those type of things, it easily bypasses our ability to scrutinize it or to critically think about it, which means it goes directly into our subconscious, or it goes directly into us on a sensory level. I mean, sometimes something could be stimulating you on a sensory level from the environment, and you're acting a certain way, and you don't even know why you act in a certain type of way. You don't even know. But it's something that was deliberately done in the environment to stimulate that type of response or reaction, and we don't even know about it. We don't even know. You know, all of this is important. You know, it's important. This is the kind of stuff I be teaching children this stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was showing children some of the subliminal messages that they put in Disney films and in other different type of cartoons. Showing them this. Pay attention to what you're watching and what this means. Because once you start getting youth to think critically, they good. They're not going to be easily led in the wrong direction and hard to be led in the right direction. They're going to be conscious enough of being able to scrutinize things and to think critically about what's going on around them. Because here's the thing. A lot of children may know certain things ain't right, but they may not be able to pinpoint what it is because it's a fine mist that they naked eye can hardly detect. And if they can detect it, they may not have the language to be able to articulate what that is, or even the proper response to deal with these type of things. That's what I'm basically talking about right now. I'm talking about things that's going on. I'm talking about the proper way to analyze it and to articulate it. And I'm also talking about the proper responses. What we can do about this. What can we do about this? You know, one of the things that, let me get a little bit more into that. One of the things that I've done with my queens growing up is I made sure that my home was a safe space. It was sacred. Meaning, whatever was in my home reinforced their identity in a positive way. So on a sensory level, what they ate, what they saw, what they listened to, what they smelled, what they touched, reinforced their identity that greater is that which is within them than that which is in this world. You know, not only did I set up my environment like that on purpose, but the language that I've used to engage them also reaffirm their identity. So I don't just say queen just to say queen. Nah. I could not imagine how many times since my queens was young that I've referred to them as that and only called them that. That's using my language to consistently reaffirm their identity. I can control that environment in my home. Even what I expose them to on television. I wouldn't just sit them down in front of no TV or nothing like that. We watching this together. And when we gonna watch it, we gonna build on it. We gonna break it down. Because I'm gonna teach y'all how to critically analyze this stuff. No stimulus is just going in your head without you being able to critically analyze it. You know, I can do that in my own home, but we don't necessarily have that type of control once a person leaves out of your home. So you have to be able to control your environment and make it a sacred, safe space that reinforces your identity, how you see yourself, and not have anything in your home, anything, I don't care how small it is, that contradicts who you are or your identity. And your language has to be based upon that. I don't even talk in language and say I can't. I don't even use that. I mean, I just used it right now. But I'm just talking about in regards to how I articulate my view of this world. I don't use that. I don't use try. There's certain words that are not a part of my language at all. You know what I'm saying? So I made sure that was also something that I deliberately did when it came to, you know, my daughters, my queens growing up and how I engage them, you know. Now, as we go outside in the world, that does not reflect my sacred space. I've had to protect as well as facilitate or interpretate the sensory things that were going on in the environment that I was conscious and aware of, not in no obsessive compulsive way, but be able to add on and just build about certain things that they're seeing. You know, these are some of the same things that my parents did with me and my siblings growing up. I mean, they did some of these things deliberately, you know? So I added on to that and took it a little further than what they took it, you know? And both of my queens, when they were 9 months old, by 9 months old, when they first start walking, I took my eldest, Asia, to the downtown library in Buffalo and just let her walk around in the children's section. She walked around, and out of all of those thousands of books, she went and grabbed a book about the universe and brought it back to me. My phone is dying, so I gotta plug it in. Yeah. She did that and brought it back to me. That's because I was consistently teaching her and showing her things about the universe since she was born. So she knew exactly what she was looking for at 9 months old. My other queen, Aziza, I did the same thing with her, and she went and got a book about the continent of Africa out of all of the thousands of books in the children's section. That is a book that she went and got for me at 9 months old. That's because I was very strategic and deliberate about being a brain architect. That was when I was in my early 20s. I was doing that. In my early 20s. Like, imagine what I'm capable of doing now. You know what I'm saying? As much as I experienced and what I know now, it's crazy, you know? But if you're not going to take an active role in being the brain architect of your children, as well as the children in your community, who is? Who is? Who's going to do it? And keep in mind the things that I've mentioned. You have institutions that invest billions of dollars a year in making sure that they are going to be the brain architects of our children. Billions of dollars to do that. You know? We have to take a responsible role in making sure that we are growing and developing the next generation of ambassadors of a better future. And we do that by being brain architects. You know, all of this stuff I'm talking about, like, yo, and I teach preschool. Man, I ain't playing. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm making sure that our children, before they start their educational career, that they have a very sound impression of who and what they essentially are. You know what I mean? I mean, that's what I do. And I'm going to tell you, a lot of times, my peers, people who are older than me, and if they get it, they get it. You know, the only reason why I'm sharing this with those of you who are watching is because I know that most of y'all on here are studious enough to go back and study exactly what I'm talking about, so you can get a deeper understanding of that, as well as use some of the different methods that I'm sharing with you and seeing what the results will actually be. So I know that I'm not wasting my time, you know, but sometimes you get people and they just set in their ways, and what I'm talking about don't mean nothing to them. You know? Yeah. But yo, Queen, I'm just sharing what I do. And a lot of times I don't talk about stuff like this. Sometimes I'm just inspired to do that. Sometimes I'm just inspired to do it. But you see what I'm thinking about and talking about at this time. Let me see what time it is. Yeah, it's almost 1 a.m. This is how my mind functions. I ain't sitting around watching no Sports Center or nothing like that, or, you know, watching, you know, some girl twerking or something like, no. This is the kind of stuff that I do. I'm constantly studying. I'm constantly learning something. I'm constantly seeing how I can put certain methods in practice. There is not one day that goes past that I cannot tell you with clarity what I learned that day. And that's one thing I would encourage y'all to do too, right? Every single day before you go to bed, make sure you have the ability to articulate one thing that you learned new today. One thing. And I'm not saying that you got to go and read some book or something, or no. One thing. It could be something as simple as learning that this church is a food bank on these particular days of the week now. You might not have known that before. You know something new. So, and I'm saying this because a lot of times it can become discouraging for people who are invested in growth and development and striving to get better, when they can't quantify their growth and development. You have to be able to do that. And that is one simple way of you being able to quantify your growth and development. Think about something you learned new today. One thing that you've learned new today. And you should be able to do that every single day, because that is evidence that you lived that day. Not only that you lived that day, but you did grow in some capacity. Just on a cognitive level, you grew. Because now that is a new synaptic connection that you can reference somewhere down the line. Because now you have that new information. You've grown in terms of a degree of knowledge a day. And that is a concrete, quantifiable way to measure growth and development every single day. And then somewhere down the line, you may even want to increase that and say, you know what? I'm going to learn 2 new things today. 2 new things. And that gives you a way of being able to track your growth and development. You know what I'm saying? As opposed to just not really knowing if you're growing or, what that actually looks like. You can actually measure that. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, but that's important. That is important. These are what successful people do. They have certain things in place, mechanisms that allow them to grow and develop. And like I said, this is how my mind functions. I'm talking to y'all straight raw, how I have conversations with my inner circle. If I'm on the phone and stuff like that, and I'm talking to some of my brothers and sisters or something, like this is what we be talking about. We ain't talking about, oh, did you see Nicki Minaj and, ranting about Cardi B? I mean, I strive to learn about things like that as well, simply because I'm always engaging people that is what their level of consciousness is about, and that's what they're into. So I have to strive to meet people where they are, and that's the only reason why I strive to expose myself to certain things. But other than that, this is the kind of stuff that I be thinking about and researching and learning more about and communicating with other people. We are scientists of life. So like any scientist of life, you're always conducting research and learning about life. And as you begin to better articulate what that is, you present that research to your scientific community for debate, for critical analysis, and they have the freedom to add on to it or to take away from it. And if it's something that you need to add on to it, you take it right back to the lab, add it on, you present it again sometime down the line, or if it's something that you see that needs to be taken away, you take something away from it. But that's how we live as scientists of life. So when we're communicating with each other, we're presenting our research to our scientific community. We ain't just in our feelings and telling people how we feel or no. No. Our relationships are based upon growth and development. And those are the type of people that are important to have in your life, because not only are they invested in you, but they are also invested in the future. They're invested in seeing a better world than what they see right now. Not everybody's like that, So in terms of having knowledge of self or a journey of enlightenment, some people say it is a process of becoming closer to God. Whatever way that you want to describe it, it's a path of knowledge. Knowledge is a compound word, know and ledge. It's being aware of your own limitations, the ledges that you set for yourself. So gaining more knowledge or being more aware or expanding your consciousness is the process of facing your own fears. And oftentimes that is a fear of heights, of growth and development, of your own altitude, your own aptitude. You know what I mean? So knowledge, whatever you want to call that journey or quest, is the constant process of growth and development, and it has to be deliberate. A lot of times people only read or study or research if they taken a class at school, or if they're required to take this training because it's required for their job. or whatever. You know what I'm saying? But to truly be invested in the path of knowledge, you have to deliberately study, because your growth and development is important. So you're reading and you're studying for that purpose, not only so that you can grow and develop, but because you can become a better resource and reference point to other people. You are becoming a guiding light. You know, not so that people can just follow you, but so that you have the capacity of teaching others how to become that guiding light themselves. You know what I'm saying? But it has to be deliberate. It has to be something that you're committed to each and every day. And I'm not necessarily saying you have to read a certain book every single day. If you do, that's cool. Long as you're studying, long as your intention is to grow and develop and learn something new that will allow you to become more of a resource or a reference point to other people, that's good. It may be doing something else, but it has to be something that is deliberate in terms of growth and development. There's not a lot of people that's doing that. They're only doing it for other reasons if they are. Whether they have to because they're taking a class and they're going to get a grade, or they doing it because they're going to get a promotion at work or whatever. But to be doing it like, let me show you something. Here's a book, a good book. Transformative Community Conferencing. You know, practical approach to dialogue. You know, here's something. The Catechism of Spiritual Philosophy. Here's something. Spike Island. You know, here's something. What Truth Sounds Like by Michael Eric Dyson. Here's something. Creative Quest by Questlove of the Roots, talking about the creative process. You know, you have to have a variety of different things that you're studying and researching that allows you to expand your mind. You know, my city, Niagara Falls, is only 16 square miles. That's like a little bit more than half a marathon. You know, and that in size is oftentimes the circumference of a person's thinking. You know, no matter where a person lives at, you know, when they're not able to think beyond their physical environment, then their experiences, their ideas are going to be limited to that environment. So if you have limitations when it comes to physically traveling places, then it's important for you to travel when it comes to the mind. And you do that through research. You do that through study. You do that through exposing and experiencing things through the lens of other people. And that's also something that I encourage the young to do. Oh yeah, that SoundCloud episode is it's episode 28. So it's www.soundcloud.com/AtlantisBuild/episode 28. I posted on here. Yeah, so even with youth, it's like youth that use social media. It's funny because like I'll be talking to them and I'll be like, yo, how many people are you connected with like on Snapchat or any of these other social media apps that you're on that live in a different state? And it's rarely some of them are connected with people even in a different city or state. You know what I mean? So they be using like social media apps and stuff, and it just be their friends that they see and talk to every day at school. They don't even use that as a way to expand their consciousness. And then it sounds far-fetched to them sometimes when I ask them, yo, are you connected with somebody that lives in another country? Like, no. I'm like, why? You know, connect with people in other places, especially if you have an intention of going to a certain type of place. Get to know people there. Develop friendships and relationships with people who have eyes and, you know, give you an eyewitness account of what's going on there and what the landscape looks like. But some youth, they don't even use technology in that capacity. And I encourage them to connect with somebody in a different city, in a different state. You know, not just people that you see and talk to every day that's in your class. You know, they be walking right down the hallway texting somebody or Snapchatting somebody, and they right down the hallway. It's like, come on now, you know? And that is also similar to a lot of things that we do just as a people when we don't recognize our own infinite potential and we set our own limitations on what it is that we can do. You know, it's no different than how these youth be using their social media. But the way you challenge that is you expose yourself to learning different things. You know, sometimes, I mean, I'm so interested in damn near everything that I'm just always learning about something. I mean, it could be a crock pot recipe that I'm studying. You know what I mean? Or I come across some music by this Irish folk band that was putting out music in the 1970s or something. That's interesting to me. You know, I was talking to a woman earlier today whose parents were immigrants that came over to this country, and her mother was Irish and her father was Italian. And she was telling me a little bit about that. And I was asking her, you know, how did they meet and under what circumstances? That's interesting to me. You know, she was always also telling me about how she lived in California in the 1970s and what was going on during that time. You know, it's like I'm just so curious and interested in so many things. It's like, I mean, I love learning. I genuinely just love learning. And not just for the reason of my own self-fulfillment, but learning to the degree where I can successfully articulate it to a person so that they can actually use what it is that I learned. And that's one of the differences between knowledge and wisdom. You know, knowledge is the foundation. Knowledge is the information. It's consciousness and awareness. But wisdom is the expression of that consciousness and awareness. It's discerning that consciousness and awareness. You know, it's the action. You know, if knowledge is the foundation, wisdom is the decorum. You know, wisdom is what it looks like. Yeah. So, yeah, y'all looking at my eyes, y'all. I'm looking at my eyes. I'm getting tired. So, yeah, I just wanted to share this briefly. But y'all have a good night. My physical battery's running down now. So, I got to get some rest. But I'll build with y'all again soon. Thanks for checking this out, though. Peace.